for now. James in here. Yes, we're a little bit late. He says, if I yell at the pot, does it boil faster? Unfortunately not. My fiance has tried multiple times, but here we are, joined as always by Jay and Chris. Jay, Chris, before we jump into all this, y'all already know the drill. Let the people know where they can find all y'all's great content. We can go straight down the line, Jay, then Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll lead the way. Jay Smith on First Sports. You know to find me here on YouTube. Appreciate you having me as usual. Ty's got some fun conversation, especially since Chris showed up.
Oh yeah, I know. It's like a unicorn. Chris, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. Look, Horns Down Pod on Twitter, YouTube, all of that, podcast, wherever you listen to. Chris with a K on Twitter as well. Definitely follow me. Hey, the season is ramping up. I'm getting tired of talking. We went through the motions. Texas has won yet again another offseason championship. Let's get to the real football on the field. Let's go.
Well, we got a lot to talk about, and we're going to kick it off with Alabama hosting several prospects, because we were talking about this in the green room. Brandon Smith, thank you for joining us this evening. But we were talking about this in the green room, and it seems like there's been this shift from Nick Saban to where the events they're hosting, it's a bit more small batch. You have a bit more intimate of a setting, a bit more relationship building, but that's not diminishing the quality of prospect that's there. We were talking about this, Chris, right before you got there. I think the lowest rated prospect Alabama has in attendance this weekend is number 144 in the nation. I think they have 4 5-stars, 3 5-stars out of the 8 or 9 guys that are there. We're talking KJ Bolden, Edric Houston, Ellis Robinson, Peyton Woodyard, Nathaniel Frazier, Zabian Brown, Casey Poe, Julian Sayin. So, I mean, you're talking an elite group. The thing that stands out to me instantly, Jay, is something that we talked about yesterday or the day before. Mm-hmm. You have 2 Buford players, KJ Bolden, Edric Houston. Now, I've told you, that Buford to Bama pipeline has been real. We're talking guys like Jake Pope, Justice Haynes, another guy that just came from Buford. The question is can Alabama continue that pipeline even when Dylan Raiola transfers from Arizona to the state of Georgia at Buford High School? And there's a reason it's Buford, because they don't want that talent leaving the state, and Buford is talented. The other thing that stands out to me here, guys, is you have a Nathaniel Frazier and you have a Zabian Brown, both from Mater Dei, right? So you have 2 guys from Mater Dei coming out there, and there's another guy from Mater Dei that is incredibly highly rated. If you actually look at the 24/7 sports rankings in and of themselves, I believe he's a top 15 player, and Adrian Breland, the defensive lineman, Aiden Breland, I apologize, the defensive lineman. So this is an interesting weekend for Alabama. It's going to be interesting to see how they can position themselves. One thing we've come to understand about Alabama recruiting, they're going to really start ramping up July, August, and then when the season gets here, we start seeing prospects visiting still, like a Kobe Black, who has his official planned out in October, which I love, getting him there later after he's taken his visit to an Oklahoma, to a Texas, to an A&M. Then you get him out to Alabama. Give them something to think about. That recency bias is real. So the last thing I'll say before I pass this off to y'all, if we currently look, Alabama is sitting just outside the top 25 classes in the nation, but what they do have is very impressive. They have an average recruit rank of 94.36. They only have 8 prospects. 3 of the 8 are 5-stars. 6 of the 8 are top 200 prospects. 7 of the 8 are 4-stars. The 1 3-star Joseph Ionata, I do believe, is a little bit underrated, but I am once again a little bit biased in that assessment.
Where's he from?
He's from Florida, and Mario Cristobal wanted him bad. He's an interior offensive lineman. Now, we can talk about Cristobal as a head coach, but Cristobal is an offensive line coach. We know what he does, right? Yeah. He's a great evaluator. So looking good for Alabama as we get to the end of June. What are y'all's thoughts for Alabama recruiting going forward?
I just wanted to just come in on a 3-star kid. I mean, he's a 3-star out of Florida. We all know that, those leagues that Florida kids play in. I mean, look at Stutzman. Stutzman, it was a 3-star coming out of high school. He probably would have been a 4, could have possibly been a 5 in some other states, but probably a 4-star in most states coming out of high school, just because of how competitive it is down there in Florida. Because Florida, Texas, Cali, Georgia, really your in Louisiana, really your rich recruiting states. You always want to try to have pipelines out there to those states. But as far as recruiting, I mean, I think it's kind of same old. You're seeing the quote unquote just kind of surprise teams get up there really high in the rankings right now, but you already know that OU, Georgia, I mean, not Georgia, but OU, Bama, teams like that are going to come in there late and possibly, they're going to push you down to from 4 all the way to 18 simply because of the caliber of players that they're being able to get. So, honestly, I really am interested, on the defensive line, on the D line. What are you guys going to do to kind of combat Georgia? Simply because I feel like Georgia right now is just producing defensive linemen out the wazoo going to the league. So that's really interesting to me to see kind of what's going, because linebacker wise, you guys can go out there and get any kid that you want. I really feel like the Sammy Brown kid, a lot of those kids, I feel like there are a lot of kids. I know that he committed to Clemson, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, if Saban wants a kid, he gets the kid. I learned that the hard way with Jace McClellan a few years back, thinking to myself, okay, well, he's just going to entertain the conversation. Nope, nah. Saban sitting right across from you. It's hard to tell him no, So, but D-line wise, that's kind of where I want to see you guys get back to being even more dominant. Obviously, you guys had, Will Anderson last year, but I mean, let's be real, he was an edge, and for whatever reason, Golding wanted to use him all over the place. And he's really
an outside linebacker.
Yeah, he's outside linebacker, And so I mean that was my whole thing. But as far as the defensive line, what did we say, Ty? Few months ago, we talked about when was the last time Alabama had like a dominant D lineman. I think that was Quentin Williams, is what you said, right? And
yeah, Quentin. I think Jaheim Otis is the guy where, and in fairness, I do have to say, Justin Aboigbe was having a big year, then had that unfortunate neck injury, but he was turning heads. But Jaheim Otis and Justin Aboigbe, I think, are the best opportunities. But a great point. That is an area Bama needs to address, which is why the loss of Peter Woods stung so bad when he committed to Clemson over Alabama. Because Bama, like Oklahoma, like Texas, has a need at that interior defensive line.
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
No, I was going to say, just kind of add to where this Bama recruiting is going. We talked about this a little bit, Ty, in the green room, on these smaller events that it seems that Saban and staff are doing. And even more fascinating, too, I'm looking at some of the other visits. There's a ton of visits coming up in like October and like end of November. It does look like Bama has forethought everything with this. Like, okay, cool. It's great to have a nice big event with kids and let them bond with each other as potential classmates, but it's even better to bring them to the game and really, really sell them on Bama if it's someone that we now got to compete with other schools on, especially around NIL. Like, that's the one thing that, the struggle comes in with it. Everybody thinks that every single player is, they're going to drop a bag on all of them. No, a lot of these situations really are these kids just trying to decide which school they want to go to, because there's so many options for them, especially when they're elite. You've got, I think just about every school will match each other in price if they want to. At that point, the kids got to decide, okay, whose bag do I want? So if we want to talk bags, we can talk about how multiple schools are going to do that same thing. But I digress. I love how Bama is making these small, intimate events together, and I think that that's going to be a huge deal for them going forward, in trying to close out players, especially as you're seeing Georgia trying to move up the ranks in the recruiting world.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Chris, to piggyback off of what you said, I wanted to start with what you said about teams starting fast. I think a great example of this is Notre Dame. We can look at Notre Dame this year. We can look at Notre Dame last year. Last year, they were in a situation, Keon Keeley, Peyton Bowen, Dylan Edwards, all in that Notre Dame class. And we're talking about that Notre Dame class in May. We were looking at that Notre Dame class. I think they had 16, 17, 18, maybe even 19 guys in May with some of the top prospects in the nation. Still finished out as a great class. But you can kind of see, if you have to pick between starting hyper fast or kind of picking up towards this part of the summer and then building your momentum now, personally, I'd rather build my momentum now, because it seems like the teams that do that really jump up. And the other thing, Chris, I wanted to say on your point, it's impossible to argue with what Georgia has done on the defensive line. I can sit here and sell Alabama's development, and all of those are very real points. They're all very real points. you just sit here and point to Georgia, and there's nothing you can take away from what they've done. They're winning. They're sending guys to the NFL. And at that point, you absolutely have to respect it. Alabama's going to have to win these battles, but you can't take away from what Georgia has done. They have a very real pitch on that defensive line. And in a way, I think it makes the recruiting more entertaining, where now this new challenger has emerged. And yes, Georgia's always recruited well, but now they can say, hey, we're just sending them to the first and second round of the NFL draft, like in droves.
Yeah, so the conveyor belt, man, they got these kids in mass production. Like the factory is just going.
The transfer portal, and I say transfer portal, but the NIL era, transfer portal, yada, 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 all of that really comes into the fold as well. Because, I mean, even for Alabama, I think you guys don't necessarily have to do it. I'm not going to say that you're doing it, but you still can pitch against a team like Georgia and say there's still an opportunity for you to actually come out here and get playing time year one, possibly, with the guys that how they're stacking classes. We stack classes too, but how they're stacking classes, I don't know. I just think that, that's a conversation that I think, for sure, like a Penn State would have if they're in a battle for a kid like that, that Georgia is on or whatnot. But, I just think it's really interesting with Georgia, the new dynamic that they have. But there's a lot of really good recruiters in the SEC, which is going to be really interesting for, OU to continue the momentum they have. Because, hell, look, a few days ago, last week or so, Florida, Billy Napier, everybody is clowning him. And then all of a sudden, like, boom, 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 boom. About 7 commits later, we're saying like, okay, we get it. We got to give him some time, So it's going to be interesting. But like I said, defensive line has always been kind of the thing for me, because you guys always have those edge guys, the linebackers, guys like that. But I want to get back to, that D line, that interior D lineman, because I always expect Bama to have somebody on the D line who is just hell on earth for teams to deal with.
Speaking of a true freshman that could break through for Alabama on the defensive line, 5-star James Smith.
Yeah.
He was very impressive, but you also have Jordan Renaud, who, when he went to the All-American games, they said he was sunning kids. Just really out there, hyper impressive. So yeah, no doubt about it, man. The defensive line has got to be a big win for Alabama.
One more thing that I was going to add, Ty, speaking of recruits, obviously you guys had the MVP of the Elite 11. What are your thoughts about this quarterback room, not only now, but just going forward to next year? Because, you guys got a lot of talent in that quarterback room. The fact that you guys, I don't know, every list that I've seen, I haven't seen Bama in the top 10 of best QB rooms.
Which is fair. None of them have proven it. So I'm fair.
And I get that, but talent alone, I'm just like, man, Bama has a deep plethora of quarterbacks that are 4 or 5-star, and I don't know. I just think it's going to be interesting for this year and going into next year, because you want to say what Saban's going to do, but just going off of how the whole, Tua thing went, how Jalen went, even in his first few years there at Bama, you never know.
No, you don't know. And it's interesting you bring that up, because I do a show now with the Bama Standard, The Final Whistle, Tuesday evenings. Great time if y'all would like to catch that. Tuesday evenings, love to have you over there. Always a great time. Joined by guys such as Matt Goodell, who played wide receiver for Alabama, Chris James, who was a defensive back for Alabama. So it's just a great time. But we were talking about prospects, and I gave my 2 must-land prospects in the class of 2024 for Alabama. One of them, DeMarcus Riddick, the 5-star linebacker in the state of Alabama, currently committed to Georgia. Chris, for a lot of the reasons we just talked about, Georgia's building a machine. The last thing you want to give them is a 5-star linebacker that you could really use in your backyard. That can't happen. That can't happen. Not when Georgia has the pick of the litter at linebackers everywhere else across the nation. DeMarcus Riddick, must-land prospect. But the guy that really stands out to me is Julian Sayin. Because let's be honest, guys, bringing in Tyler Buckner can create answers down the line. But if you bring in a quarterback at the end of spring because you're not satisfied with what your quarterback room looks like, inherently that creates more questions than answers initially. right? Because now you have another guy to question, is he the dude? So now instead of asking, is he the dude 2 times, you ask it 3 times. So maybe Tyler Buckner creates answers, but there's no question that initially it creates more questions. To me, Julian Sayin does nothing but create answers. I truly think he's that good, man. I truly, truly think he's that good. And Eric, yeah, Bama already had a machine, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Bama is a machine. Bama has a machine. But the thing is, the flies in Texas just continue to kill me with this rain. But the thing we have to realize, Eric, is if you can not help Georgia become any more powerful, you do everything you can to avoid it. Right. And like a DeMarcus Riddick in Bama's backyard, you don't want to have Georgia start raiding Alabama talent, especially a linebacker that you could really, really use. So for me, man, I think Julian Sayin is a must-land prospect for Alabama because I think he gives stability in there. I think he gives a lot of stability in there. Drew, how you doing, man?
Oh, I'm good, man. It's been a while, hot minute since I've been on with you guys. But hey, I'll say one thing in regards to high school recruiting. I'm sure glad now I'm in the Oklahoma City area. I'm sure glad we don't have to play Carl Albert. That's all I'm saying. So, yeah. So yeah, they're loading up again. So.
Yeah, they're going to be very, very talented.
I'm glad we're 4A and not 5A. So
yeah, I can imagine because that's going to be a loaded roster, especially with Sperry transferring up there. That's going to be interesting to watch. Yeah, Eric. No, don't get me wrong. Bama is a machine, but so is Georgia now. We can't deny that, and we just don't want to give Georgia any oil, right? Like if you can take away the WD-40, you take away the WD-40 and you let them figure it out. They'll figure it out. But you just don't help them, right? It's just like them trying to get Dylan Raiola to Buford to stop the pipeline that has been going to Alabama, right? Especially when they have a KJ Bolden, Edric Houston. That's big. But not only is Bama having a big weekend, guys, the Texas Longhorns are having a huge recruiting weekend filled with prospects that would be huge for Texas's class. Now, earlier today, I asked the question in a video, should Texas fans be worried about where they currently sit in recruiting? Because currently they have the number 62 class in the nation with 5 commits. Personally, I take this approach with every college. We're in June. I'm not going to be too worried about any college's recruiting situation in June. Now, if we get into October and you're outside the top 25, let's have the conversation. And even then, you can hit me with, oh, well, we're waiting on this guy to pull the trigger and this guy to pull the trigger. And I could sit there and say, fair point. You're looking good. It's still way too early. But looking at the guy, and you know what? Before we go into the weekend, I did want to kind of get y'all's takes. So switching the Micah Hudson situation. Crystal balls flying in for Texas Tech. Jay and I were talking about this before. This seems eerily similar to me to the Ruben Owens situation last year where he committed to Louisville and then ended up decommitting and ending up at Texas A&M. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Micah Hudson, but it's going to be interesting to see how Texas Tech keeps him in that class when Brian Hartline is going to keep knocking on that door. Nick Saban is going to keep knocking on that door. LSU will keep all these schools are going to continue. Will Texas Tech be able to keep him? What are your thoughts there?
Go ahead. I would say I think the key is Joey McGuire. I think that he's
great relationships with high school coaches all across the
with the high school coaches, all the rest of that stuff. I think the fact that if I'm not mistaken, I think Hudson's didn't his dad play there at Texas Tech?
I think there was a connection.
Somebody in his family, so he's like a legacy there, right?
I'm fairly certain
let me look it up.
It's the legacy to Tech.
Well,
I know
I just know because he's from the DFW area that Joey McGuire, based on his high school connections and everything he coached around, he has a great relationship with a lot of those big time coaches around the area, and so I think that's their hope, and they really have connected and made a really good relationship between each other, and so I think that they continue to strengthen that. But like Ty said, I mean, the big boys are going to keep knocking until you tell them
I think the big boys are going to keep knocking. I know the only thing. First off, I'll keep going with this point right here. I think Texas Tech keeps him simply because of Joey McGuire. I think Joey McGuire is building something there in Texas, at Texas Tech. But the fact of the matter is this kid is on record as saying, quarterback would be a big decision. Will play a big factor in his decision making when it comes down to finally, signing his letter of intent. So for me, I think what it is a thing about how good is this quarterback coming back for Texas Tech, and how good is he going to be? Is he going to be able to, propel them to a better season than what they had last year? They beat OU, they beat Texas. I get that.
Well,
but at the same,
perhaps he may be able to grab one of those quarterbacks and have him come with him at Tech. You never know with these guys that they like to play with each other. I'm not saying it's going to be a high level like 5-star guy, but somebody that they need to come in there and run that kind of offense. And then obviously with the facilities that they're getting there in Texas Tech and everything like that, they're doing something really, really good out there. And it'll be interesting to see now that Oklahoma and Texas are leaving and going to the SEC, they have a chance to really put their stamp on the Big 12. So it'll be interesting.
So here's a theory for you. And Ty, you're not going to like this at all, probably.
Okay, go for it.
My theory is that if Ty Buckner is coming in there, okay, if TCU, Texas Tech, and Baylor got to be champing at the bits. Why? Because Milroe, right? There's a question out there about Milroe. For me, it's just that why wouldn't he go home? From the get-go, I thought, why wouldn't he go home? To me, I think that, you could play the waiting game. You could do all that you want to do, because if something goes down where Buckner is that guy, and then let's say Simpson jumps him and on the too deep chart or whatnot, and then you got these other 5-star freshmen, the writing's on the wall for you if you're Milroe. I think that TCU, Texas Tech, and Baylor, you're basically looking at your quarterback right there, because let's just be honest. So I think that transfer portal plays a big deal for especially for a team like Texas Tech, because that's how they're going to be able to really, I guess, supplement these classes that they have in a great way, honestly, because they're going to have good classes and good high school talent, good talent from the DFW area, from all over Texas. But the fact of the matter is, when you can mix that in with those top level, transfer guys that you're getting, or transfer guys that you're doing evaluations on, you think that can help your program. I think that Joey McGuire in the end will be able to keep this kid, not only because he's a legacy, but I just think that Joey McGuire, just as a coach and what he's selling, I think a lot of kids are going to get behind that. And the fact that going into the Big 12 next year, talking to, I think, Nick and Steven, they're like, hey, Texas Tech should run the Big 12 once OU and Texas are gone. They should run it. My personal opinion, I think O State should run it. I think Gundy's the best coach in the Big 12. Once OU and Texas leave, I think he's the best coach. That's just me.
I think that program's about to.
That's a story for another day.
I would throw Dave Aranda before Gundy.
That's a good point.
But
you're right
up there.
You're right about one thing, Chris.
The only thing with Milroe is, if he's going to transfer, he's got to do it now, because he can't wait until, because there's certain cutoff where, before fall camp, it's a wrap. So I don't know. I don't see a window for him, to transfer really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the thing, man. I don't think that will happen, but in the transfer portal era, you can never count out that that's a scenario that could happen, right? We've seen it time and time again. We know what this era is, so I'm certainly not going to rule it out. But I also think right now, if I was betting, I think Jalen Milroe is probably the most likely to win that job. And I'll tell you why. It reminds me a lot of the season where Blake Sims worked heavily with the wide receivers, with Amari Cooper, came back and had an automatic connection. All the Bama wide receivers went down to Florida to train for a while. Jalen Milroe went with them and stayed the entire time and was just hammering. And from what I have been told, he and Malik Benson have got a really strong connection. And just to give y'all an idea as to how talented Malik Benson is, whenever Bryce had his pro day, this man had been on campus for like a week and a half, and they had him out there as the guy catching passes for Bryce. They've never played together. Mm-hmm. Bryce had a list of wide receivers at Bama, and they threw in Malik Benson because he is Himothy. He is going to be that dude this year. He is so gifted. But it's a very real possibility, Chris. I don't doubt it at all.
With the way things go in this era, there's nothing out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I'm of the mindset that, look, if Texas is to lose Micah Hudson to Texas Tech, which per all the predictions, that looks like where this is going. One, if you're a Texas fan, you got a lot of wide receiver talent. Would you have liked Micah Hudson? No doubt. Kid is fantastic. You got a boatload already on campus, and a lot of them have eligibility. The other thing I think we need to look at is who is in attendance. And if we look there, I mean, we're talking guys like Colin Simmons, the number one edge in the nation, the number one player in the state of Texas. We're talking Dominic McKinley. We're talking Selman Bridges. We're talking Kobe Black. We're talking Zena Umazulu, right? I mean, there's a lot of names that would be massive for Texas on a weekend after where they had Jordan Ross, made up a lot of ground there. So for Texas, this is a big opportunity. If I was to give fans two names that I think would just be wins that would send Texas into overdrive, Colin Simmons and Dominic McKinley. Now, Dominic McKinley, Jay, you and I have talked about this several times. That's going to be a tough battle for anybody to lift him out of Louisiana. It's going to be tough for Oklahoma, who, by the way, is in a fantastic position, has done fantastic work, as Todd Bates was really early on Dominic McKinley. I think Todd Bates was on him when he was at Clemson, and that relationship has been established. That relationship's looking really good. So, and then lifting guys out of Louisiana, that'll be tough. But Bo Davis is that dude.
Yeah.
Bo Davis's record speaks for itself. I don't need to say much there. This is a fantastic weekend for the Texas Longhorns. And I will say this, one of the most intriguing prospects in the nation to me is Selman Bridges. I don't know if y'all have checked out a lot of his game. He's 6'3", 170 pounds at the cornerback position, and he's good. he's really, really good. Like, he's really, really, really good. So it's going to be really interesting seeing where he goes. Drew, thank you for joining us, man. Great to see you.
I will be back in one of these times when I'm not so busy, but I love always popping in. Yeah, when I'm not moving, I will be settled here in the next couple weeks in the 405. So yeah, we'll talk at you guys later.
All right, man. Take it easy.
See ya.
Preston in here saying Zena's going to Oklahoma. Hey, Oklahoma's in a good position. But I think we can't deny that the brother plays for Texas. That would be awesome, though, to see one brother play for Texas, the other brother play for Oklahoma. You talk about fun, man. I wonder if a lot of kids going to stay away from LSU because of the infractions. Maybe.
That's a good question.
Maybe.
That is scholarship. They lost, 37 or something like that?
They lost the scholarships, but they didn't lose the postseason
eligibilities.
Eligibility. I think that's what really, my uncle sent me that, and then I looked it up on Twitter. I was like, oh, and then that's what everybody was. I was like, man, they didn't lose that. Then that it doesn't really affect them all that much.
Well, you have to be more selective about who you take at that point. That's kind of, to me, is the biggest.
But that could almost work in their favor.
Yeah.
Because if they have to be that much more selective, they're going to preach to Dominic McKinley. You are the guy. Like, you are him. Which, in fairness, everybody else will be preaching the same thing. So I think we could kind of spin around in circles there. Jay, what are you thinking, man? There's a lot of big names at Texas this weekend. What are you thinking?
No, Texas did a great job putting together a nice event for the weekend and bringing in some of these top players. Like you mentioned, I mean, in the comments, Cordy dropped all these big names from McKinley to Simmons, Okoye. You got, and Okoye actually just left. I think he's in Tennessee right now, but they're putting together a nice amount of top recruits to come into town and try to build some type of a bonding situation or whatnot. I just saw pictures from Eli Bowen, Peyton Bowen's little brother. He was out there at Texas not too long ago. So, of course, they're going after the players, and they're doing a good job of actually getting them on campus. The question is going to be closing. The Micah Hudson thing, man, that's a little tough. And we talked about that. I didn't get a chance to really chime in on it, but Joey McGuire, as well as Coach Juice, Justin Johnson, is doing a really good job together and really trying to take over that, that Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, because remember, they both were at Baylor together for a few years. So they've been really cultivating the relationships in that area very well. So the Micah Hudson one, I could see him going there, because also remember, Tech has history of really, really, really good wide receivers, some greats, some Blitnikoff winners. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would stick there. But there is always a chance that he could flip. But outside of that,
he'd be the highest rated signee in Texas Tech history.
Tech history,
and he'd be the only 5-star.
in this era, I could totally see that happening.
Yeah,
It
that's
just,
wild.
yeah, it's wild, but it makes sense that that's where we're at in the NIL world, man. Sometimes some schools will throw everything at one guy, and if they can get him, try to surround him with the pieces, and hopefully you'll see success long term out of it, or at least have a good season or a good couple of seasons with that player there. And maybe it dominoes into consistency, but at the same time, you usually are who you are, and hopefully Tech can take advantage of it. But Texas is really they're kicking butt when it comes to um, bringing in some talent. I'm curious to see what that offense and defensive line looks like as far as recruiting goes. If they can actually close and seal the deal. Like Colin Simmons is one that I know that everyone's really leaning towards Texas landing, and I'm really
Them or
curious.
LSU, yeah.
Yeah, it's between those two. And LSU's got themselves with Harold Perkins out there as a freshman being an All-American. It's kind of one of those like, yeah, if I get you to come here, I could probably make you into another Harold Perkins, which there's only one of those. You probably won't see that very often. Correction, you don't see that very often. It's usually a random occurrence. It's spontaneous. So the question is going to be, can Texas really pry him out of LSU? And I think he's going to be their biggest recruit out of their entire class. If they land him, then I think that's a successful year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And so one of the things that I think is interesting, look, there's no denying Joey McGuire. One of the things that I remember standing out when I would talk about him or talk to people when I was interning with Dave Campbell's Texas football, we would talk about, coaches that have fantastic relationships with people within the state. And Joey McGuire was one of the main people. You heard nothing but unbelievable feedback for the relationships he was able to cultivate, the way coaches thought of him, college coaches thought of him. And whenever he got the Texas Tech job, there was a guy that we were working at the state championship with that was a big Texas Tech fan. And he was just telling us like, hey man, the high school coaches in the state, they think the world of Joey McGuire. Like he could unlock some recruiting. But at the same time, man, like I said, I think there's a lot of coaches out there that are great dudes, great recruiters that cultivate great relationships, but they don't have the results that like a Brian Hartline, like an LSU. And it's one thing to feel all good then, but if Texas Tech goes out there and they don't have a great season, they don't look like they're going to be a team that you can put, what then? Are you going to bank your talent on like that? That's all. We also have to acknowledge the development here. And look, no doubt Johnson is a great wide receiver coach, great relationships in the DFW Metroplex, but this is kind of why I err on will he ultimately end up at Texas Tech? I'm not saying no. I'm just saying this feels an awful lot like the Reuben Owens situation from last year whenever he committed to Louisville.
That's fair. That's fair.
Preston says Texas isn't getting Simmons. I would certainly favor LSU right now. But one thing we do need to acknowledge, man, is that that's a position at premium for Texas. They're going to be throwing the kitchen sink at Simmons this weekend.
That Texas has to do that. I mean, obviously, it's impressive with the list that they can bring in. It's Texas. Texas is always going to go big or go home. I think for me, one question that I have, and we'll ask this, next Wednesday at some point, but for Texas, when are you guys going to get that D line talent? When are you guys going to get those names? I think that you went out there and you got a guy, and a guy like Colton Vasek. I think we're all pretty big on him. Not even the fact that he's switched, but he flipped his commitment to Texas. I'm not mad at it. He's an Austin kid. He's right there. I get it. But at the same time, I mean, that's a step in the right direction, but you got to get more of that. You got to put a premium on that. DB wise, they're always going to have solid DBs, different guys like that. You see the Freddie Du Bois, guys like that. I mean, they got some good recruits coming in. They got some good recruits that have already committed. So you already know that. It's just that D line as far as that edge, because that's where kind of, OU has faltered so many times before we got BV. But that's the only question I have for them is when you're going to get that talent, those guys in.
It's so funny you say that. Jay and I were in here Monday talking about the defensive line recruiting, and I don't remember if it was Cordy. Cordy, it might have been you. Let me know if it was. You were in here though. I do know that, And we were saying like, oh, OU has a big need at defensive line. And I think it was Cordy typed in the chat. He said, if y'all have a need, we're over here starving, brother. Like
That's a good point. Yeah.
They as well have a very big need there, which is why Dominic McKinley was a name that I think we need to pay some attention to. And Bo Davis, we know what he does when he gets his hands on these elite prospects, but Texas, I'm interested in seeing what they do on the defensive side of the ball on those trenches, right? That they have some names that are currently there, but what about the next generation? What about after the guys that are there? Was it Shadow? Okay, it was Shadow. Yeah. I knew it was one of y'all, man. That was great. It stuck with me all week, as you can tell. That has stuck in my mind all week. It's made me crack up several times throughout the week.
Yeah, and that's not even like a diss or anything. Normally I'll be on here, just talking noise, but I'm not even talking noise. I'm just being being honest with you.
Bama has the same need, no doubt.
Because for me, like I keep saying, it's great. We could talk about all of this, what they did last year, 49-0. That's great, but man, you lost some key pieces on that defense. Overshown is going to be a bigger loss than what a lot of people think. I know you went out there and got the Hill kid, but were you really that confident with what you had returning, And those were kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Overshown's was great for Texas. I'm super interested in this. Will be Jay. I'll let you go after this. This will be kind of my last thing. I'm super interested in one Catalon. I really hope he gets back healthy, because if Jalen Catalon gets healthy, oh man, he's going to be so fun in that secondary to watch. But the name you talked about, Anthony Hill, whenever I was watching that spring game, and it's a spring game, so take it with a grain of salt, right? It's a glorified practice. They're trying to teach. But when I saw Texas flipping him from inside linebacker to out, and not just lining him up on the outside, but asking him to do some more outside linebacker things where it's just no, get dirty in the trenches. You're going to go. And I saw him doing it well. Oh, I can't wait to see what the future holds for him. I can't tell y'all what a treat it was to go on Friday nights to the facilities right here in Denton, right down the street from my house, and get to watch Denton Ryan play. And you'd fixate on some of the talented guys they'd have, like an Anthony Hill, or like when you'd go to Geyer, the Peyton Bowens, the Jackson Arnolds, you just fixate on them. And unbelievable what they can do. Yeah, Cordy, there was a comp. 24/7's analyst actually comped, I believe, he and Jahad Campbell here recently, before Anthony Hill, to Micah Parsons. And he is so good, man. Micah Parsons is fantastic, but I can't wait to see what Anthony Hill does. I think that was a huge, huge, huge addition for Texas. Interested to see what they do on the defensive recruiting going forward. Next topic we need to talk about, one for the Oklahoma fans, the battle for Taylor Tatum. We're not going to spend long on this. Jay and I have discussed it to death. Chris, I don't even need to ask. I know you're in the know. Number one running back in the nation, Taylor Tatum, just outside 5-star range, coming in at number 33. So it could be a situation where, he ends up as a 5-star, but just outside, number one running back. A few weeks ago, it looked like this was a USC win to be had, but Oklahoma did fantastic work at Champ U Barbecue. I think the question for me now is, how confident are y'all that you land him? It seems to me that the writing is on the wall. Crystal ball predictions are being flipped, but what would this mean for Oklahoma's class landing Taylor Tatum? Jay, I'll start with you.
Oh yeah, it'd be huge. Snatching up the number one running back in the country, getting a two-sport athlete where we've shown as an organization we're very good at managing and handling. It'll be huge. DeMarco Murray has always done a really good job of finding the right running backs that end up going league and doing special stuff. And the current backfield we had with Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk both getting 100 yards as freshmen in the bowl game, and then Eric Gray running for over 1,100 yards coming here. And I had a whole bunch of crow on Eric Gray. Not that I thought he was bad, just didn't think he'd be the feature back. And sure enough, he shut me up. And so I think Murray does a fantastic job in what he's doing, and bringing in a player of that caliber would just be huge for the class. It'll just reestablish that Oklahoma is definitely going to try to find themselves another Adrian Peterson type player. I mean, Adrian was probably the best running back we'd ever recruited. If we can find another in that caliber, not saying Taylor Tatum is, but Taylor is talented that, baseball is so huge for him. And, being a baseball player and also playing running back, except two-sport athlete, man, can't beat that.
Yeah, always interesting to see these two-sport athletes. Chris, what were you thinking about through this whole process? What would this mean for Oklahoma, and where do you sit? Do you think that USC still can counterpunch on this battle?
I think that obviously they can counterpunch. I think that Riley is going to do whatever he can to try to counterpunch this, because let me preface this before I say Riley needs him more than OU. He needs him in a worse way, because I mean he wants to have that. To me, I think running back wise, I know Riley can go out there and get guys in the transfer portal, different things like that, and plug and pull with his offense as well. But I think that's kind of more of a need for him, because Riley wants to run the ball. Let's be real, Ty. He wants to have a good, solid running back core, just like Jeff Lebby. But I mean, Jeff Lebby is like, hey, look, whoever's running the rock can run the rock. But I think for me, I mean, this running back room is full. You look at some of the other recruits. Personally, I really, really big on the Carl Albert kid. What's his name?
Robert.
You're talking about Xavier Robinson?
Yes.
Robinson.
Yes.
And his recruitment's on Tuesday, so
yeah. So
I mean, his commitment's on Tuesday, so
we
we'll be waiting for that too. I'll be in attendance.
But no, I mean, I think it's huge for OU. It's a step in the right direction. I mean, DeMarco, for me, my uncle asked a question to me the other day, a while ago. He said straight up, he's like, man, DeMarco has done really, he's done good things here at OU, obviously, but has he brought in that one back that everybody just thought, oh my God, that's the OU type of back. That's the, Adrian Peterson. That is the, Marcus Dupree, stuff like, names like that. And, we talked about it for a while. And it's like, nah, I don't think he's brought in like that name, but he's brought in just some damn good backs. I mean, we're all bullish on Sawchuk this year. Everybody thinks Sawchuk is going to have a great year. I think Barnes is going to have a great year as well. You have a plethora of backs in that room, man. Don't forget about Dylan Smothers. Don't forget about Caleb Hicks. I mean, you got some guys in that room, and I mean, this is just yet another talented piece. And then Caden Durham, you could potentially take 3 backs in this class and have Durham, the Robinson kid, and this Tatum kid. I think that right there is what is huge to me and what would be huge for OU. Not necessarily a fan of taking 3 backs, but I mean, if you could get all 3, then why not?
No, I don't disagree there. We know Lebby spreads the ball around, especially with his running backs. This year, he kind of ran it through Eric Gray, but I also think that's because Eric Gray was the experienced back. Yeah. Right. Like, you had so much new on the offense. You had Dylan Gabriel trying to kind of bring everybody up to speed on the offensive system, the offensive line, learning what they kind of needed to do now, the wide receivers. And then you had a very experienced running back in college football in an Eric Gray. And I think he just works with what Lebby wants to do. So I think that's why you saw so much through one. Very interested to see if you spread it around more. Now, one thing that we talked about in the green room before this came on, right? And it's something that Sooner, you allude to it right here. I think Tatum didn't like all the recruiting gurus flip their crystal ball predictions from USC to Oklahoma. I asked Jay the question in the green room, and I'm going to ask it now. I'll start with Jay, then go to Chris. If Taylor Tatum doesn't commit this weekend, how do y'all feel? Do you feel like things will kind of open back up for USC to really get back in this battle, or what's the situation you're looking for? Because I know there's rumors that a decision could be made this weekend. There's rumors that it could be July. Heck, we know recruiting. It could be December. Who knows?
Right. Honestly, we kind of talked about it in the green room, and as I process and think about it more, and send messages and try to get some assessments and stuff, it does seem like the flipping of CBs concerned him. It seems like, I mean, there was a ton of them, because it's still going. Like, literally 2 of them came while we were talking. Rutgers Insider put in a CB for him. Michigan Insider flipped his from USC at Rivals. It seems like
Powerhouse Rutgers putting their foot in the race.
Like hey guys, I got a crystal ball for a 4-star running back. I mean, it's not for us, but I got
all
one.
the way across the nation.
But it does, and I think what it is, it sounds like a phone call has happened to multiple coaches, and that's how all this information is getting leaked out so quickly. Like, I don't think this is from the staff at Oklahoma saying, or putting out there that, oh, we've got Tatum. This feels more like a kid picked up the phone and started calling everybody and was preparing to make his move, and it got wind before he got to put out there himself.
Yeah.
And that's what it's because this happened too fast. Because especially when he canceled the Michigan trip, as soon as he canceled that Michigan trip, everything dominoed down. And it's like, that's interesting. The Michigan Insider instantly changes his picks. Like, okay, it feels like a lot of insider information is getting leaked out, not from the Sooner side, but reaching out. Because it sounds like Tatum is a very respectable player that would actually pick up the phone and physically tell people, call them and say, hey, I appreciate the offer. It's been great. I'm not going to be coming to your school. And he may have even told them where he's going to go. Because I think in a lot of circumstances, these players will call and tell coaches they're not going there, but they won't tell them where they're going. You know what I'm saying? So it still keeps speculation out there about who or where he's going. So with that, he may have just straight up told him, nah, I'm going here. And then all that information started flying. That's what it sounds like.
And in fairness, Jimmy, I don't think you're wrong here. In fairness, I understand not liking the fact that a lot of crystal balls have been flipped because it feels like, but at the point where Oklahoma has a no visit policy and you already have your official visit slated and then you cancel an official visit after,
it makes sense.
I don't think it, takes a whole lot of, people looking into the situation to read the tea leaves and be like, just a reasonable guess.
I don't know. I think that takes a little bit of rocket science in there somewhere, but
yeah,
I don't know. But but the question you asked, if it doesn't happen this weekend, is there a concern? I've kind of gotten off of that boat of concern. I think that he's just probably picking a date and is going to just chill out and let things calm down. Because to be honest, the crystal balls are probably going to keep rolling in through the weekend. And the minute I see a USC insider flip theirs, then it's probably the date that's going to happen. Or he's told them to hold off on that. I don't know. But it feels like the phone calls went out. And that's why the firestorm happened.
Chris, same question to you, man.
I mean, honestly, I would piggyback off of what Jay said. I think what Jay, I was sitting here kind of just mulling that over, and I was like, that makes perfect sense. That's probably what happened. I trust this coaching staff, man. I really do. I trust them as far as, especially on the recruiting trail. I don't think that it's been leaked or anything like that. I just think that, hey, he's kind of made a decision. I think that for me, shout out to Skip Johnson, man. I mean, he's came in big, right? Just the fact that you can help in that recruitment or whatever. And then obviously I think OU's a strong program as far as baseball is concerned. I don't know, man. Like I said, I think that Riley's going to do what he can, but we've seen Riley lose running backs before. I think I just talked about one that he lost not too long ago. But
Kamar Wheaton and Jace McClellan.
Yeah. We'll be seeing Kamar this year with at SMU. But no, I just think that for me, I do think in my heart of hearts, I think it's OU. I think he probably had a hell of a time here at the Champion Barbecue, and I think they did everything they could to try to close those deals with a lot of these kids to go ahead and get them on the trail. And especially every time, these past 2 years, anytime that you've heard these kids say, hey, there's a lot of solid commits, we're just waiting for them to go ahead and let this stuff come to fruition. I've heard Jay say it 1,000 times. I'm one to just think, man, it's a bunch of kids right now that are ready, that are about to commit. Like I told Jay, for me, the reason why it's so wait and see with some of these kids is simply because I think that they want to have the big spectacle. I think this is one of those classes where some of these kids don't necessarily want to, just commit on the dot. I think some of them want to actually have more than just a graphic. I think they want to have actually the family around, have it at their high school or whatever the case may be. And then you're going to see some of these recruits start, around September. I expect us to have a pretty full class, and then just to kind of chip in a little bit towards the end of that cycle before signing day. So, no, I think as far as Tatum, I want to say I think it's a foregone conclusion, but at the same time, you never know.
Yeah, well, I will say this, because Jason says, or it could be OU reporters not knowing what they're talking about. If it was just Oklahoma crystal balls being inserted from the Oklahoma staff, maybe, but this is from national analysts. We had a Rutgers analyst insert a crystal ball prediction. There was a Texas analyst insert a crystal ball prediction. I'm fairly certain a Michigan analyst. Two Michigan.
One from On 3, one from Rivals.
Yeah, insert. So this is from... Yeah. This is from a lot of sources. This isn't just relegated to the Oklahoma people. This is from the national side. So certainly something we have to watch, no doubt about it. He says not Wiltfong. True. Very true. Not Wiltfong. No doubt about it.
Or Mike Roach. Mike Roach is still,
Mike Roach is still with USC. No doubt about it.
He usually goes in sync with Wiltfong, but
yeah. Well, in fairness, Wiltfong doesn't have a crystal ball prediction inserted.
Yep.
He doesn't have one inserted for USC either. So he just hasn't inserted one yet. But that is a good point, Jason. No doubt. Fair point.
Texas insiders have him pegged already.
Yeah, the Texas Jordan Scruggs has him crystal balled to Oklahoma. And those crystal ball predictions came after Mike Roach's was inserted, and he's a national analyst. But very fair point. Wiltfong hasn't. And I do think it is worth mentioning, Jason, to your point, Mike Roach is a national analyst for 24/7 Sports, definitely well connected, and he still has his crystal ball prediction inserted in favor of USC with the highest confidence of any prediction inserted on 24/7 Sports. Mm-hmm. So definitely something to talk about. Absolutely why we wanted to talk about it this evening. And we know both USC and Oklahoma have done insane things with the running back room. So absolutely something we're going to have to watch. He would be a cornerstone for either of those classes. The last thing I wanted to end tonight on, Nebraska is getting some huge wins on the trail. Now, I don't think it's any secret that I want Matt Rule and Nebraska to come back and really do something. Chris, I found this. I haven't gotten to show you, but just because you always bring it out, first college football game I ever went to, because I was an Alabama fan. My dad was a Nebraska fan. Nebraska and Auburn played in the Cotton Bowl, and my dad took me so he could show me what an Auburn loss looked like in person. Great day. It was a great day. But regardless,
that's good.
I've gotten to see Nebraska play. I remember Brandon Jackson was the running back then. He ended up going on and playing for Green Bay, and I thought it was phenomenal watching him play. Drew says, why do these insiders ruin the surprise for a play? Now, that's a conversation we could have, Drew. I think that there's a double-edged sword here, where part of it is it's something driven by the fans, right? Like the fans, we have created this problem, and they have brought something out to cater to the fans and our need for recruiting information. But at the same time, I can certainly understand where you're coming from. It can take the shine away. But that being said, going back on Nebraska, they've gotten some big time wins today. So as far as I know, just 2, unless they've gotten another one while we've been in here. But it's interesting that they're from the same school, meaning Matt Rule is really starting to pick it up on the recruiting trail. Guys, what are we thinking about Nebraska? What do you think about Matt Rule, and what do you think about these additions? Jay, I'll start with you.
Oh, no, I think that Matt Rule is trying to lock down his state. That way he can go ahead and start really building a powerhouse there. I mean, they got the quarterback, Danny, what's his last name?
Daniel,
is it Kalen?
I think that's right.
I always forget how to pronounce his last name.
Daniel Kalen.
I always forget how to pronounce it. Exactly. And they got him from because he was at he was a Missouri commit initially, and then he decommitted from Missouri, and he's staying in state. And then Bellevue gets his 2 wide receivers also. And so, if there's one thing you want to do as a school like Nebraska, is at least lock down all the talent you have there. I remember Isaiah McMorris was looking at Oklahoma. He had made a few visits there. And so he's focusing on definitely winning in-state talent first, and maybe even trying to grow organically And if he can develop those into some elite athletes, man, he's got that school is going to start rolling a lot faster than expected. The next big thing for him is start to get more of a national space for them, which is going to be having to get some people, which he now can from the West Coast, with USC and UCLA coming to the Big Ten. Opportunity to recruit there, recruit in Michigan, recruit in Ohio, maybe try to get some East Coast guys. I don't know if they're really going to be able to pull Texas players, but they may have to start hunting for diamond in the rough players down there. But overall, if he can get his players and lock down the in-state guys, man, he's going to be a force long-term.
Yeah, no doubt. It's one of those things where the Nebraska faithful, it's interesting when we talk about them because their success was just far enough in the past that it's a receding memory, but not far enough removed that we've completely forgotten about it. Now, you're younger college football fans. If you're any younger than me, you probably don't remember much of the Nebraska reign. I think I'm probably that last generation that really got to appreciate what Nebraska did. I mean, one of the earliest quarterbacks I can remember watching play football was Eric Crouch, right? That's about the beginning of my college football memories, is that era. So if you're younger than me, you probably don't remember. But to your point, blue bloods typically are teams that, even if you don't consider Nebraska a blue blood, because I don't know that they are. I think that they are.
Not anymore.
If you have blue blood, they're like removed. But institutions, blue blood's the wrong word. Let me rephrase what I'm trying to say here. Institutions that have known prolonged success in college football. That's what I meant to say here. There are only a few blue bloods. I apologize. Institutions that have known prolonged success in college football typically find success come back to them at a certain point. And I'm hoping that's what we see with Nebraska. Chris, what's your thoughts on Matt Rule and what he's doing out there right now?
Bro, yeah, you skitsed out. What'd you say?
What's your thoughts on Nebraska and what they're doing out there right now?
It's to be expected, man. You know, I talked about it a couple of weeks ago with some people about Matt Rule. Matt Rule's a damn good coach, man. Let's be honest. We saw this happen at Baylor. What did they go 1-11 the first year that he was there? And then you saw exactly. I mean, Ty, I can tell you, I still go back to this day and I watched that 28-3 comeback, and I just think to myself, how the hell did we get out of there with the win? I mean, they were hitting, and then they were hitting. I mean, it was. I mean, Baylor was tough, man, and he had something going, and then he went, for some odd reason, he went over there to and mess with the NFL with the Panthers, and that was a sigh of relief for me. But no, he's a damn good coach, man. He's a damn good recruiter as well. And you see some of the staff that he has around him as well. You can't forget about that. Will Nebraska ever be the powerhouse that it was? That's yet to be seen. But at the same time, this year, I'm not going to judge him on anything because I'm just happy to see Nebraska back in a really good place. I think going out there and getting Jeff Sims, if you can get his accuracy, under control as a passer, it's going to be hell on wheels for a lot of teams. He strikes me as a guy kind of like an Adrian Martinez, just wasn't terribly accurate with the ball, but when he could shred you, right? So I think that they are going to do well for themselves this year. I think that they're going to go out there and have a damn good season for their standard, and then probably, kill it in the recruiting ranks as well and bring in a crap ton of talent in his 24 class, simply because, I mean, I like what Matt Rule is doing, and plus he's a trusted coach. Has NFL experience now. Now he can come back and say, hey, I know what it takes to be not only an NFL to get you to the NFL, but I know what to do all 4 years to put you in position to do that. And we can do that here in Nebraska. And we know that Nebraska is going to always put money in their program and make sure they have top-notch facilities and all the rest of that as well. I don't think this is going to be a staff that has to rely on a lot of transfers and going to Cali and different things like that. I think that now Matt Rule has Texas connections. He's still down there. He's going to have those DFW connections. He's going to have connections all over Texas. Maybe not as strong as he did back in the day, but at the same time, I think that he's going to be able to walk. He's a coach that can walk into a facility or whatnot. And he's going to go get guys from down there in that Texas area as well to pull that talent. But I think that for me, Matt Rule has always struck me as a guy who I do my own evals and I figure out what players I need to get and what players I want. But yeah, if you ask me, I think that Matt Rule's going to do a damn good job, and everything that's happening now for them is to be expected, man. Matt Rule, like I said, Matt Rule's a damn good coach.
Yeah, no, very excited. And one thing I think we need to acknowledge, the work they've already done in the transfer portal. I hope Gilbert comes back. Y'all remember Eric Gilbert? Transferred to Nebraska. Now, I know it's been a long time since we've seen him on a football field. All hope is that he, picks up where he left off, but that could be a big win. They got an offensive tackle from Georgia. They got MJ Sherman from Georgia. Billy Kemp, the wide receiver from Virginia, did a lot of good work for Virginia. It's not like he was a 1,000-yard wide receiver for them every year, but he put in some really good work. They got Elijah Judy off the defensive line from Texas A&M. Chris, to your point, Jeff Sims. But you look in their recruiting class in 2023, headlined by Malachi Coleman, top 100 prospect in the nation, wide receiver who stands 6'4", 190 and has track speed. You remember they raced him in, what's the cat? Was it Dylan Edwards that ended up at Colorado? There was the All-American game, those two raced, and it was neck and neck.
It was I actually did a short on it. Gosh, I forgot the name of it. Let me go find it. I know what you're talking about. But yeah, him and Dylan Edwards raced each other. They both 4.4 speed. And I think Dylan beat him by like an inch. But yeah, they were getting it.
Coaches make more in 1 year. Yeah, it's wild what they're paid, no doubt about it. But I think there's also a massive difference that we need to acknowledge between coaching in the NFL and coaching college football. And I think that can probably be applied, because I actually had a buddy who played for Carolina when Matt Rule was there. So yeah, and it's an interesting conversation to be had there, for sure. But one thing I want to talk about, because when Nebraska was really good, they had a pipeline in the state of Texas, especially that Plano area, right? That they were there. And I just want to take us through this class of 2023. I look and I see a Manor, Texas. I see an Argyle, Texas, just 5-10 minutes from where I currently sit south. Heck, where I used to work was in Argyle, Texas. Outside of that, I'm seeing Arlington, Bay City, Texas, Cypress, Texas. So they're able to come into the state of Texas, another Arlington. They've been able to get some wins. If they can establish that pipeline, that's going to do really well for Nebraska. I'm just interested, man. I think it's a good time to be a Nebraska fan. I think there's a lot of reason for excitement. And I really agree with what you said, Chris, about not judging Matt Rule on year one. I think whenever we talk about coaches that take over programs that are in a bad position, patience. They need patience. Guys, I think that we've just about covered it all, unless y'all have some major topics you want to end on this evening.
I would just say, man, what are your thoughts about Napier out there with Florida?
So I think that right now,
I mean, at least with that whole dust up about the QB flipping, and then
look, I don't know that that's anything. That's a wild situation through and through. That is one of the wildest situations we've seen in recruiting in quite some time. I mean, you're talking about a quarterback that's the class of 2025, reclassifying 2 years ahead, class of 2025 to 2023. Turns out that report is true. It's just the destination that's wrong. It's not Florida, it's Ole Miss. So that was really intriguing. The reason why I was like, man, that's tough. It's because they had DJ Lagway, right? In the 2024 class. Now, if they lost DJ Lagway, we'd have a lot to talk about here. We'd have a whole lot to talk about here. But they still have him, and they just went on an insane run. That's going to be something we have to watch, because I think Billy Napier just needs time. Now, the question is, will Florida give him time?
Yeah.
This has always been what we've kind of swam in circles with, right? Especially on the SEC Connect. because there's no arguing that Florida's a proud place. They're going to want results, and Billy Napier needs time. One thing that I think we talk about, maybe not enough, is Billy Napier in this rebuild is almost happening in reverse of how we're used to. Typically, we're seeing year one is where you have your mass exodus in the transfer portal, this, that, and the other. That happened year two for Billy Napier. So this year is going to be very interesting. I'm really interested what they do with the quarterback situation. They should have better running back play, but that offensive line, circle it. That's the unit that will make or break the season for the Florida Gators, is that offensive line. So that's going to be a big one. I like Billy though, man. I just think he needs his time. And I also think that he, like some of the other coaches we talk about, inherited what he thought was a Ferrari up until he got up to it and realized there's no engine. It's sitting on cinder blocks and the transmission is gone.
Gone. He's starting from scratch. A lot of work he's got to do there.
You got a shell. That's what you got.
I'd say as long as he doesn't lose Lagway, I think he'd be fine. If he loses Lagway, then I'm very much concerned.
If he loses Lagway, it's bad. That's where I will admit, Chris, okay, I now have major concerns. What are you laughing at?
I was just laughing at what a perfect cracker said of as far as the Nebraska comment. I thought that was funny.
Those that say Nebraska is not a blue blood are the same that say LeBron is better than Jordan. Did you see Poe's comment up here earlier?
What did he say?
Okie State tickets or an Arby's sandwich? What are you taking?
I'll be honest with you, I don't like either one, so it's going to be a toss-up.
That's why I wanted to say pass.
I'll take the ticket.
We'll pass on that one.
Pass.
I'll take the ticket so I can sell them. I'll scalp them.
Pass.
And a perfect cracker, I don't know about the blue blood statement on that. I mean, I guess with the 5 national championships, you could consider them a blue blood because they're running the 90s.
Yeah.
Because they had 3 titles in 4 years. But then they had back-to-backs in the 70s. Oh, was that 70 and 71? I mean, that's really that's it? They do have over 900 wins, so I guess you could give them that.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of the blue blood talk is about the storyline, If you think about back then, I mean, we didn't have social media or whatever. We hung on to the storyline. The stories built around these games. Catholics versus convicts, stuff like that, There's some people who would consider Miami Miami is, do you guys consider Miami a blue blood?
I don't. I consider them one of the institutions that are incredibly proud, but I wouldn't put them blue blood.
I mean, that's just kind of, but it's for me, it's all story driven. I don't know, but Nebraska, in the 90s, all the rest of that stuff, at one point, Big 12, you could, pretty much say it probably was the best conference in the nation. I mean, because that's what.
In the 90s. Yeah. Oh my God, the Big 12 was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got 46 conference titles. So I mean,
that'd be look. We have an interesting conversation we're going to have. What constitutes a blue blood?
Yeah, I mean,
that's going to be something we have to have.
There's a lot of criteria out there on it, though. But I mean, it's hard to kind of say because I know for me, it's about the storyline. It's about the story. I
think it's incredibly subjective.
I mean, Texas A&M probably considers himself a blue blood, but
of course they consider themselves a blue blood. Which, speaking of, before we get out of here, I did want to say, guys, keep your thoughts and prayers with, if you know any Aggie fans, they had a big loss in their program. Yeah. Defensive coach Terry Price passed away. You never want to hear that. All accounts, that fan base, the response on Twitter indicate that he was someone incredibly valued by that program, by his family, by everybody that was around him. So thoughts and prayers out to any of the Texas A&M fans that program. That's a tough loss. That's an awful loss.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's tough. Frank Selleck was 54 when he won a conference title for Nebraska. He's now 78. That's rough. That's not good. That's not what you want to see.
I forgot Ndamukong Suh did win a Heisman there, didn't he?
No. Suh didn't win a Heisman.
Oh, no, he didn't win a Heisman. He was a finalist, though.
He was a finalist, yeah.
Which is hilarious.
Arguably, hey, he's one that we could argue maybe should have won a Heisman.
It's true. God, Sue was special. Oh,
He
no, he
was-
had so many awards. Good God.
Oh my God, he was so good. But I think that the blue blood conversation is one we are going to have.
Yeah, it's a good off-season topic.
That's a really good
Book
off-season
market.
topic. We'll have that one next week. Until then, guys, y'all know the drill. Chris, Jay, let the people know where they can find all y'all's great content. We'll start with
I'll
you,
lead
Chris.
us off.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll lead us off since Chris was quiet. Jay Smith, I'm Fair Sports. I know where to find me. I'm always here hanging out with Ty, so appreciate it as usual.
Hey, Chris Griffin. Hey, Chris with a K on Twitter. Hey, Horns Down Podcast. You guys know where to find us. Yup.
Yep, always a good time, guys. We'll catch y'all Monday, 5 o'clock, 5:30 Central Standard Time, as we cover all the events from this weekend, as I think we're going to get more fireworks this weekend, and July is going to be wild. Until then, we'll see you next time. That's it. See ya. Spinning Wheel of Doom is now